Happy New Year. It's 2025. Hey, Buck Rogers, where's my jetpack? Yeah, that's what I thought. Jerk. Welcome back to Tales from My Spinner Rack. I'm Gary Sassaman, the former Director of Programming and Publications for Comic-Con International San Diego. I'm back from my long winter's nap with a special preview of what is hopefully coming up in the new year from Tales from My Spinner Rack here on YouTube. It's also time for Out with the Old and In with the New, so let's set the 2025 stage with a whole new look, one that I hope reminds you of a certain fantastic foursome in its choice of font and colors. Let's start with a new background, add some colorful spinner rack graphics featuring actual books on my real-life spinner rack, and then add the new logo. There. Oh, and let's pop in this little thingy too down here in the bottom right corner, just so you remember which channel you're watching. It'll probably come and go as I forget to place it, or as I lose it because it's covering up something important, but it'll be down there all nice and cozy, probably annoying some of you, and maybe even me. I get annoyed easily these days. I want to thank all of you new subscribers in the past few months, finally putting me over the much coveted 1,000 subscriber mark, a goal that I've been chasing for a while. And speaking of marks, no, not these guys. Thanks to my friend Mark Evanier over at newsforme.com for mentioning my videos on his site, which certainly helped me achieve that goal. I've known Mark for going on 30 years now, and he's an incredible source of comics knowledge. Like this little tidbit he told me after I posted my Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos video. John Severin only lasted just a few issues penciling the Sergeant Fury book because he preferred working full script, not Marvel method, where the artist paces the story as he pencils it. Instead, he became the book's longtime inker over Dick Ayer's pencils. Thanks, Mark. When I started Tales from My Spinner Rack in January 2023 as a series of blog posts on my website, innocent-bystander.com, this was what our logo looked like. When I shifted over to YouTube videos and started this channel in the fall of that year, the logo evolved into this next version, still reminiscent of the great hand lettering by Artie Simek on the Marvel Monster books of the late 1950s and early 1960s. And now, here we are in the far-flung future year of 2025, our third season, so to speak, and the next rung on the Spinner Rack evolutionary ladder, which also happens to coincide nicely with the next step in the history of Marvel Comics logo fonts, with this one, reminiscent of the Fantastic Four and Amazing Adult Fantasy title logos, which may have been designed by Marvel production maven Sal Brodsky, but probably tweaked and improved by Mr. Simek. Incidentally, all the fonts I'm using are from Comic Craft. The three used here are, left to right, Foom, Monster Mash, and Thingamajig, all of which perfectly capture Marvel Comics in the early 60s era we all love. This is not a paid endorsement, just an acknowledgement of a great product that I use in the production of my graphics for my videos each and every time. It just happens to be the 64th anniversary of the premiere of Fantastic Four #1 this year, alongside the release of a brand new movie coming July 25th, which hopefully will finally seal the deal on their big screen stardom. Our content in 2025 will include a mini focus on my all-time favorite comic book series, with 3 very special episodes scattered throughout the year, and planned to feature the world's greatest comic magazine by Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby. But I'm getting the fantastic car before the torch. Let's take a look at 10 of the topics I hope to explore in my videos in the coming year, presented not necessarily in the order that they will appear, except for the first 2 and maybe the last 3. Let's start with what's coming next month, just in time for a certain holiday. In the late 1960s, Marvel Comics embarked on a massive expansion, publishing more books than ever in the previous decade. It started in early 1968 with the end of the split books. Strange Tales became solo series for Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Doctor Strange. Tales of Suspense begat Iron Man and Captain America titles, and the Hulk and Submariner lumbered off from Tales to Astonish into their own books. This happened while Marvel was still in a distribution deal with Independent News, which was owned by the same company that owned DC Comics and had previously limited Marvel's monthly output. By the summer of 1969, Marvel had a new distributor, one who didn't dictate how many titles it could publish each month. The Comics Code Authority had also relaxed a bit, so Stan Lee and company debuted two new horror suspense titles, Tower of Shadows and Chamber of Darkness. And two new romance titles, Our Love Story and My Love. All of these titles' first issues were cover dated for September and October 1969 and featured the great Marvel artists of the time. In honor of the romantic month of February, we're going to focus on these two romance titles, which showcased great art by John Romita and Gene Colan, both of whom had toiled for years in DC's romance line, and also John Buscema, Don Heck, Sid Shores, and even an amazingly memorable story by Jim Steranko in Our Love Story number 5. Look for this episode, which we could only call Love is in the Air, just in time for Valentine's Day. But sorry, you'll have to bring your own candy and flowers. My love affair with the Fantastic Four started in earnest with issue number 3, the cover of which introduced the foursome's costumes and that wonderfully wonky flying bathtub of a Fantastic Car. And in an early instance of bombastic hyperbola, Stan Lee boastfully added, "The greatest comic magazine in the world," nice and big on the cover of number 3. With issue number 4, it was mercifully shortened to the world's greatest comic magazine, a tagline that stuck for years and years across the top of each and every issue. And for once, Stan wasn't overinflating the appeal of the series, at least in the 1960s. He and artist co-plotter Jack Kirby built an entire universe on the foundation of this one title, and I was, and still am, madly in love with those 100-plus issues of Fantastic Four by the team. Stay tuned for information on the world premiere of this episode, which will hopefully happen at the end of March at a very special time and place, with a YouTube version debuting in early April. Hey, I hear Superman has a movie coming out this year too. Did you know that? Yes, I've seen the teaser trailer and I loved it, especially Krypto. You gotta love Krypto. I grew up on Superman in the 60s. He was a constant presence on the TV and in the comics we brought home from the newsstand. So it seems like a great time to look back at some of the memorable artists who've drawn the Man of Steel over his 85-plus year history, focusing on those who defined the Superman character over the years, including co-creator Joe Shuster, Wayne Boring, Kurt Swan, Gil Kane, John Byrne, Jerry Ordway, Dan Jurgens, and maybe even a few more, in an episode titled My Favorite Superman Artists. Hopefully they're all some of your favorite Man of Steel artists too. I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess that Tuesday, July 2nd, 1963 was a hot, humid day just about smack dab in the middle of summer in my tiny hometown in northeastern Pennsylvania. But on that one single day, 3 Marvel comics debuted that would proclaim to the world that the Marvel Age of Comics was definitely here to stay. The Avengers number 1, the X-Men number 1, and Fantastic Four Annual number 1 all debuted on that same day, July 2nd, 1963, and 8-year-old me couldn't have been more ecstatic. All 3 were written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby. But one of them wasn't even supposed to be on the schedule. Yes, this is the story of the last-minute addition of a new Marvel series to take the place of a troubled title that couldn't seem to make it across the finish line in time for the summer of '63. Which book are we talking about? Hang in there, true believer. All will be revealed in this episode, titled July 2nd, 1963. There was a Superman family and a Batman family in DC Comics in the 1960s. So it only made sense that there should also be a Wonder Woman family, right? Writer-editor Robert Kanigher and artists Ross Andru and Mike Esposito presented Wonder Woman tales that featured various incarnations of the character at different ages that somehow coexisted in the same time and place. Dubbed the Impossible Stories and debuting in issue number 124, Wonder Woman cavorted and interacted with a very popular teenage version of herself, Wonder Girl, who appeared as the lead on a number of covers, and a toddler version, Wonder Tot, who also had her own comics and stories, alongside Wonder Queen, Wonder Woman's mom, Queen Hippolyta, and of course Wonder Woman herself. The results were some of the wonkiest DC superhero stories of the swingin' 60s. We'll look back at this Silver Age run of comics in an episode titled The Impossible Wonder Family, mainly through their covers and a deep dive into a couple of the actual stories that presented a charming, if somewhat crazy, corner of the DC universe, with the winsome young Princess Diana stealing our hearts. Hey, Wonder Tot, where you going? And what are you going to do? Okay. There was only one king in the comics of the 1960s and 70s, and he's still the undisputed master. Jack Kirby's vivid imagination and vibrant art defined the superhero genre in the Marvel Age of comics. The Fantastic Four was his baby throughout that decade, and he, along with Stan Lee, came up with some of the most incredible characters and storylines that continue to stand the test of time and form the groundwork for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We'll take a look at Kirby's groundbreaking run of FF covers in this period, including my own personal favorites that helped put Marvel Comics on the map as the industry's premier superhero publisher, in an episode I'm calling Kirby, King of Covers. As the 1960s became the 1970s, comic book sales were in a nosedive, losing valuable newsstand space to pricier magazines. In 1971, DC and Marvel both decided to increase the price of their titles from 15 cents to 25 cents, while increasing the page count. DC to 52 pages and Marvel to 48. DC had a deep catalog of reprints to draw from, but Marvel didn't, so the company made the decision to create brand new 35 to 37 page stories in each of their ongoing series. This lasted for just one memorable month, August 1971, with books cover dated for November, as publisher Martin Goodman quickly reversed course and dropped the price to 20 cents the following month, thus leaving DC holding the bag with a more expensive product for months to come. Goodman also increased the Marvel discount to distributors from 40% to 50%, and this is when Marvel overtook DC in sales and market share. It took DC until late spring of 1972 to recover and convert to 20-cent titles. We'll take a look at that one golden month of 35-plus page new stories at Marvel and talk about whether it was Goodman's game plan all along to undercut DC and ultimately gain market share in a tale titled DC and Marvel, The 25-Cent War. If you're a regular watcher of this channel, I don't have to tell you how special it was to grow up in the 1960s. In addition to the launch of the Marvel Age of Comics, we had the James Bond craze and the Batman TV show, and all the crazy merchandise that came with them. But before all that, we had the monster craze. Television was an all-consuming furnace of content, and early on, in the late 1950s, movies became a staple of everyday programming, both in the afternoon and late into the night. And on the weekend nights, when us kids were allowed to stay up late, shock theater, or some variation of it, appeared on our local TV stations, usually with some cheesy host or sexy hostess. Originally made up of a couple of packages containing most of the famous Universal monster movies from the 1930s through the mid-1950s, the television re-release of these movies created a nationwide phenomenon that spawned magazines, 8mm home movies, the VHS and DVD of that era, model kits, and other merchandise. If you grew up in that decade, you can proudly admit, I was a 1960s monster kid. I'll take a look back at my own experiences watching those movies, reading famous monsters of Filmland and Castle of Frankenstein, the Thinking Boys magazine, and trying to build Aurora model kits and failing miserably. I actually settled for the cheap plastic one-color Marx Toys figures that flooded the market. Back in the hippy-dippy 60s, DC Comics had their slick house style with great artists like Curt Swan on the Superman books and Carmine Infantino and Gil Kane on titles like The Flash and Green Lantern. Marvel had their own style based around the dynamic superhero storytelling of Jack King Kirby. And then, in the latter half of that tumultuous decade, two young Turks appeared on the scene, artists with their own very eclectic and very different storytelling styles. Jim Steranko hit the ground first at Marvel with Strange Tales 151, December 1966, featuring Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., a series the artist would quickly make his own. And while he was gone from Marvel in a few short years, Steranko left behind a memorable legacy of stories and covers. Neil Adams started out at DC on, of all things, The Adventures of Jerry Lewis, with a story in issue number 104, July 1967. He quickly graduated to Deadman with the interior art in Strange Adventures number 206, November 1967, and became one of DC's premier cover artists, including Deadman, seen here on Strange Adventures 207. Superman and Batman covers soon followed, and his Batman stories in The Brave and the Bold redefined the post-TV show character in comics. Both Adams and Steranko revolutionized mainstream superhero comics with their incredible art and very different page layouts. Adams brought striking realism to the page, while Steranko introduced pop art influences and utilized cinematic storytelling that hadn't been seen since the days of Will Eisner's The Spirit. These two comic book innovators would shake up the industry with their work and have a lasting effect for decades to come. You say you want a revolution? Well, here it is, as Adams and Steranko blow up comics in the 1960s. From 1963 to 1968, comic fans were treated to a yearly present. Each summer, Marvel released a special line of annuals, containing at least one new story, usually with epic ramifications. And while all their king-size specials were indeed special, one title was the most thrilling of all. The 6 Fantastic Four annuals from the mid-1960s era are, in my humble opinion, among the finest stories that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby co-produced in the entire FF run, and were eagerly awaited by comics fans all over, making each and every summer over those 6 years extra special. We'll take a loving look back at these amazing issues, which represent the pinnacle of the Fantastic Four's comic book adventures. If the monthly Fantastic Four series was indeed the world's greatest comic magazine, then these 6 yearly specials were certainly the world's greatest comic annuals. So those are my ideas for 2025, but I'm sure there'll be some surprises too. After all, both episode 14 on Sergeant Fury and his Holland Commandos and episode 15 on my favorite spinner rack covers were total surprises, not only for you, dear viewer, but for me too. And in case you're wondering what the 12th episode of this year is, I have one very different video in mind, one that you'll find a hint for in one of the graphics presented earlier in this episode. And no, it's not going to be about comics, but it does concern another spinner rack. I'm also hoping to do a few more Tales from My Spinner Rack live presentations at conventions, and this time they may include a special guest. No, Batbaby won't be appearing again alongside me as he did at my WonderCon 2023 presentation. He's become way too pricey for me since he got himself an agent. Stay tuned here for more info on my convention schedule as it becomes available. Speaking of this channel, there are 15 other full-length episodes featuring everything from a look at the aforementioned favorite covers currently on my spinner rack to our old DC Comics pals Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane, still holding the record for our most views, although that covers video is coming up fast. And of course, more to come throughout the year. Please subscribe and turn on notifications for more Tales from My Spinner Rack videos as they become available, and please like and leave a comment if you enjoy what you see. Check out our playlist tab here on YouTube for other videos featuring yours truly, including my 2 team-ups with Dave from Still Only 35 Cents, the most recent including a whole slew of fellow comic book YouTube hosts, including John and Richard of Bronze and Modern Gods, and that other Dave from West Coast Avengers fame. Also my 3 appearances on the San Diego Comic-Con's unofficial blog SD Concast Show, interviews I conducted for WonderCon with artists Jen Bartel and Michael Cho, a comprehensive look at the Sense of Wonder, the Art of WonderCon exhibition I curated at the Comic-Con Museum in the forgotten year of 2020, and a discussion about James Bond films with authors Mark A. Altman and Edward Gross about their book Nobody Does It Better, An Oral History of 007. Visit my blog at www.innocent-bystander.com for the first version of Tales from My Spinner Rack, featuring nostalgic essays on the comics I grew up loving. Each post has tons of scanned artwork, including covers, story pages, and even original art. Just click on any post on the homepage and then on Tales from My Spinner Rack in the category list on the right to access all my posts. That's www.innocent-bystander.com. Follow me on Instagram at Tales from My Spinner Rack, it's all one word. Or if you want to stalk me personally, follow me at GG92118 and see lots of photos from my daily walks. Doesn't that sound exciting? I don't do X, I don't do Threads, I don't do TikTok, and there is no official Tales from My Spinner Rack Facebook page. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into the Silver Age of comics. Thanks for watching. Good night.